the final little piece I want to talk about quickly is the main things that really I struggle with, and the main things that kind of bug me, if that makes sense, or that I have to deal with in a normal day. The main thing, the probably most annoying thing for me, is my blood pressure. The reason people with spinal cord injuries have worse blood pressure than an able-bodied person is because able-bodied people's muscles in their legs and abs and all that are always firing. Even if you're completely relaxed, laying in bed, just standing there, there's little muscles that contract to send the blood back up to their head. And blood pressure occurs when you don't have enough blood in your head, or the thickness, aka blood pressure, is too low. And so, since our legs are immobile, we do not have those muscles. We do not send blood back up and keep it as thick as a able-bodied person would. So the higher level you are, the less muscles you have that are functioning, and therefore the worse your blood pressure will be. So for me, my blood pressure is a huge issue. I deal with it every day. It can be hard to talk sometimes because the more I talk, the more lightheaded I get. So if it's a bad blood pressure day, so that is one of the biggest issues with me. Staying with the blood pressure, blood flowing theme, we are at high risk for pressure sores, which are basically blisters, right? And I got my first pressure sore, and one of my only ones, in Harborview. I was only at Harborview for about a week, but unfortunately that was just where it happened. I don't think it's particularly anybody's fault. I was just not rotating enough. But the reason we get these pressure sores is because if you are sitting in a certain position, laying in a certain position where a part of your body is pressed up against something for too long, we are not strong enough in the forcing our blood to flow properly department to keep that part of the body that is pressed against something healthy and alive, which basically means when you're pushing up against something like that, the blood cannot get to that spot. And if the blood is not there for long enough, it'll start to become red and then become kind of blister, and it'll open eventually if you are on that part of skin for long enough. And of course, these are now at high risk for infection if you open your skin, break your skin, and they can get so bad that they can go down to the bone, which is pretty rare. But I believe the way Christopher Reeves died is actually by an infected pressure sore. But that is something we have to watch out. So what we have to do pressure releases, which is basically lifting our butts out of our chairs, lifting our feet up. It's going to differ for every person where their pressure spots are or where their high risk areas are. But that's another thing we have to consider. Another one's hunger, right? For me, I don't have that much sensation in my stomach. Therefore, I do now, but at first I didn't get hungry for a while, and it's still pretty different. But for a while, it was really hard for me to gain weight because I lost a ton of weight when I broke my neck. You usually either gain weight or lose weight when you break your neck, and I lost a ton of weight. And so it was really hard for me to eat and kind of gain weight because I could not eat. I was not hungry. When I did eat, I could not eat a lot. I got nauseous very easily. And as time went on, it kind of normalized. I started to get hungrier. And again, this was like everything else. I went up and down. I got hungry for a few months, and then a few months I was, not hungry and anorexic. So now I'm kind of in a rhythm where I am able to eat a lot. And if I stop eating or don't eat enough for a few days, I'll find that I'll kind of like have almost a hangover where I don't get hungry for those few days after. I have to really start eating again in a deliberate way for me to gain that hunger back. I'll literally lose my hunger, which is just something I have to consider. I have to be very deliberate about my eating, especially when I'm not hungry. I still have to eat if it's been a certain amount of hours since I ate. And then, of course, one of the other things we have to consider about or think about is society, right? Society is not necessarily built for people in wheelchairs. It's getting a lot better, I will say that. But, there will be buildings with stairs and the ramp is underground or on the backside. So even parking, right? There's spots for us to park with the handicapped spots. But I have a ramp on my car. I have a minivan with a ramp. So I need a spot that offers about 8 feet, I believe it is, of space in between me and the car on my right. So sometimes there isn't enough room in between the handicapped spot and the parking spot on the right, which is like, look, I understand they're trying to, have handicapped spots, but there sometimes do not even put enough room for a person with a ramp to open, which is a little bit counterintuitive. But there's stuff like that, right? Then there's ableist people who discriminate against us. I have only had one instance of straight up discrimination, and it was when I went to a gas station and I only had like 3 miles on my tank, right? So I try to go in to ask there if he can give me a hand pumping real quick, and he basically says, no, you can't come in because you're in a wheelchair. And I was like, excuse me, what? And he said, yeah, we're at capacity. I'm like, well, how many people are in the store? He said 0. And I know this isn't a policy of theirs because I've been to that gas station before with other people in the store, not the guy that was there. And they let me in fine. They didn't even come close to this. And this was during COVID times, right, that I've been there. And so it's very hard for me to know how to react to that because on one hand, I want to scream. I want to be mad. I'm going to like curse him out. But at the same time, you don't want to be the guy in a wheelchair freaking out, first of all. So after a couple minutes of this, me saying like, well, there's no one inside. My wheelchair doesn't count as like 7 people, whatever it might be, basically arguing with him. And he's like, yeah, fine, whatever. Come in, pay real quick, and you can pump your gas. And then I said, well, can you help me just throw the gas tank in or the pump into my car real quick? He's like, no, I can't leave the store. And my car was 5 feet away, right? Maybe like 10 feet. I'm exaggerating a little bit. But he's like, yeah, I can't leave the store. And I was like, so exasperated. And luckily there's a lady behind me. I was like, yeah, I can help you. She was really nice and helped me out. But society is not a wheelchair friendly place 100% of the time, and that is one of the problems with it. But this is something we have to think about and kind of be aware of, especially with higher level injuries. I've found sometimes there's a hill I can't push up, a ramp I can't push up. I have to deliberately park in places that allow my ramp to have room for it. And so I know a lot of my friends don't have to necessarily think about this as much as I do. I'm sure there are times when they do have to consider and make a plan. But again, I really have to think ahead. And I found that the first couple of years, I was not really thinking ahead and I was not really paying attention to that kind of stuff that much. And I quickly learned that, and I think one of the reasons was because my friends on the rugby team, which I learned a lot of stuff through, as I mentioned, did not really kind of think ahead as much as I did because I didn't need to. And I found that I did, so that was something I had to learn on my own, kind of making a plan sometimes, learning the hard way that certain places weren't accessible. Like, for example, I can't take tickets out of a ticket booth to get into parking lots. So I either have to hope someone is there or struggle with it until someone in the line of cars behind me helps me, right? Or just park somewhere else, not in a garage, which is what I do a lot of times. So I have to give myself extra time, find a spot to park, la-di-la-di-la. So these are all, things that I wouldn't say I struggle with anymore because I've gotten pretty good at it, but I had to learn about. So those are some things that us people using wheelchairs and living with disabilities have to consider.